Yi, a fabled land even in the Seven Kingdoms. Yi is a large and diverse country, a realm of windswept plains and rolling hills, jungles and rainforest, deep lakes and rushing rivers, and shrinking inland seas. Its legendary wealth is such as to allow its princes to live in houses of solid gold and dine on sweetmeats powdered with pearls and jade. Lomas Longstrider, awestruck by its marvel, called Yi, the land of 1,000 gods and 100 princes, ruled by one god emperor. Those who have visited Yi as it is today tell us that the 1,000 gods and 100 princes yet remain, but there are 3 god emperors, each claiming the right to don the gowns of cloth of gold, green pearls, and jade that tradition allows the emperor alone. None wields true power, though millions may worship the Azure Emperor in Yin and prostrate themselves before him whenever he appears. His imperial wit extends no further than the walls of his own city. The 100 princes of whom Lomas Longstrider wrote rule their own realms as they please, as do the brigands, priest-kings, sorcerers, warlords, and imperial generals and tax collectors outside their domains. This was not always so, we know. In ancient days, the god emperors of Yi were as powerful as any ruler on earth, with wealth that exceeded even that of Valeria as it at its height, and armies of almost unimaginable size. In the beginning, the priestly scribes of Yin declare all the land between the bones and the freezing desert called the Grey Waste, from the Shivering Sea into the Jade Sea, including even the great and holy Isle of Lang, formed a single realm, ruled by the god on earth, the only begotten son of the Lion of Night and the Maiden Maid of Light, who traveled about his domains in a palanquin carved from a single pearl and carried by 100 queens, his wives. For 10,000 years the Empire of the Dawn flourished in peace and plenty under the god on earth, until at last he ascended to the stars to join his forebears. Dominion over mankind then passed to his eldest son, who was known as the Pearl Emperor, and ruled for 1,000 years. The Jade Emperor, the Tourmaline Emperor, the Onyx Emperor, the Topaz Emperor, and the Opal Emperor followed in turn, each reigning for centuries, yet every reign was shorter and more troubled than the one preceding it, for wild men and baleful beasts pressed at the borders of the great empire. Lesser kings grew prideful and rebellious, and the common people gave themselves over to avarice, envy, lust, murder, incest, gluttony, and sloth. When the daughter of the Opal Emperor succeeded him as the Amethyst Empress, her envious younger brother cast her down and slew her, proclaiming himself the Bloodstone Emperor and beginning a reign of terror. He practiced dark arts, torture, necromancy, enslaved his people, took a tiger woman for his bride, feasted on human flesh, and cast down the true gods to worship a black stone that had fallen from the sky. Many scholars count the Bloodstone Emperor as the first high priest of the sinister Church of Starry Wisdom, which persists to this day in many port cities throughout the known world. In the annals of the further east, it was the Blood Betrayal, as his betrothed is named, that unheard in the age of darkness called the Long Night. Despairing of the evil that had been unleashed on earth, the Maiden Maid of Light turned her back upon the world, and the Lion of Night came forth in all his wrath to punish the wickedness of man. How long the darkness endured no man can say, but all agree that it was only when a great warrior, known variously as Haikun the Hero, Azor Ahai, Yentar, Neferium, and Eldrick Shadow Chaser, arose to give courage to the race of men and lead the virtuous into battle with his blazing sword Lightbringer, that the darkness was put to rout, and light and love returned once more to the world. Yet the great empire of the dawn was not reborn, for the restored world was a broken place where every tribe of man went its own way, fearful of all the others, and war and lust and murder endured, even to our present day, or so the men and women of the further east believe. At the citadel of Old Town and other centers of learning in the west, maesters regard these tales of the great empire and its fall as legend, not history. Yet none doubt that the Yitish civilization is ancient, mayhaps even contemporary with the realms of the Fisher Queens beside the Silver Sea. In Yiti itself, the priests insist that mankind's first towns and cities arose along the shores of the Jade Sea, and dismiss the rival claims of Sarnor and Gis as the boast of savages and children. Whatever the truth, Yiti was beyond question one of the places where men first climbed from the pit of savagery to civilization and literacy, for the wise men of the East have been reading and writing for many thousands of years. Their most ancient records are cherished, almost venerated, but are also jealously guarded by their scholars. Such accounts as we have are pieced together from heresy and travelers and scattered texts that have escaped Yiti to find their way across the seas to the citadel. To tell the tale of Yiti is far beyond our scope here, comprising as it does be hundreds of emperors and myriad wars and conquests and rebellions. Let it suffice to say that the Golden Empire has known golden ages and dark ages, that it has waxed and waned and waxed again throughout the centuries, that it has weathered floods and droughts and sandstorms and quaking of the earth so violent as to swallow entire cities, that thousands of heroes and cravens and concubines and wizards and scholars have passed across the pages of its histories. Since the further east emerged from the long night and the centuries of chaos that followed, 11 dynasties have held sway over the lands we now call Yiti. Some lasted more than a half a century, the longest endured for 700 years. Some dynasties gave way to others peacefully, others with blood and steel. On 4 occasions, the end of a dynasty was followed by a period of anarchy and lawlessness when warlords and petty kings warred with one another for supremacy. The longest of these lasted more than a century. The God Emperors of Yiti. To recount even the most important events of this long history would require more words than we have, yet we would be remiss if we did not at least mention a few of the more fabled of the God Emperors of Yiti. Har Loi, the first of the great emperors, whose throne was said to be a saddle, for he spent his entire reign at war, riding from one battle to another. Chok Chok, the hump-backed, 15 and last of the Indigo Emperors, who kept 100 wives and 1,000 concubines and sired daughters beyond count, but was never able to produce a son. Mengo Quen, the Glittering God, third of the Jade Green Emperors, who ruled from a palace where the floors and walls and columns were covered in gold leaf, and all the furnishings were made of gold, even to the chamber pots. Lo Tho, called Lo Longspoon and Lo the Terrible, the 22nd Scarlet Emperor, a reputed sorcerer and cannibal who is said to have supped upon the living brains of his enemies with a long pearl-handled spoon, after the tops of their skulls had been removed. Lo Duk, called Lo Lackwit, the 34th Scarlet Emperor, a seeming simpleton cursed with the affliction that made him jerk and stagger when he walked, and drool when he tried to speak, who nonetheless ruled wisely for more than 30 years, though some suggest that the true ruler was his wife, the formidable Empress Bathi Molo. The 9 Eunuchs, the pearl-white emperors who gave Yiti 130 years of peace and prosperity. As young men and princes, they lived as other men, taking wives and concubines and siring heirs, but upon their ascent, each surrendered his manhood root and stem, so that he might devote himself entirely to the empire. Jar Har and his sons Jar Ko and Jar Han, the 6th, 7th, and 8th of the Sea Green Emperors, under whose rule the empire reached the apex of its power, Jarhar conquered Lang, Jarjuk took Great Morak, Jarhan extracted tribute from Karth, Odgis, Ashai, and other far-flung lands, and traded with Valeria. Jayduk, the fourth Yellow Emperor, who took to wife a noble woman of Valeria, and kept a dragon at his court. To tell the tale of Yi Ti is far beyond our scope, comprising as it does hundreds of empires and myriad wars and conquest and rebellion. Let it suffice to say that the Golden Empire has known golden ages and dark ages, that it has waxed and waned and waxed again beyond the centuries, that it has weathered floods and droughts and sandstorms and quaking of the earth so violent as to swallow entire cities, that thousands of heroes and cravens and concubines and wizards and scholars have passed across the pages of its histories. Since the further east emerged from the long night and centuries of chaos that followed, 11 dynasties have held sway over the lands we now call Yi Ti. Some lasted more than a half a century, the longest endured for 700 years. Some dynasties gave way to others peacefully, others with blood and steel. On 4 occasions, the end of a dynasty was followed by a period of anarchy and lawlessness, when warlords and petty kings warred with one another for supremacy. The longest of these lasted for more than a century. Though Yi Ti is a vast land, much of it is covered by dense forest and sweltering jungles. Travel from one end of the empire to the other is swift and safe, for the great web of stone roads built by the Unic emperors of old who have no equal in all the world, save for the dragon roads of Valerians. The cities of Yi Ti are far famed as well, for no other land can boast so many. If Lammas Longstrider can be believed, none of the cities of the west can compare to those of Yi Ti in size and splendor. Even their ruins put ours to shame, the Longstrider said, and ruins are everywhere in Yi Ti. Over the centuries, the capital of the Golden Empire has moved here and there and back again a score of times, as rival warlords contended and dynasties rose and fell. The Grey Emperors, Indigo Emperors, and Pearl Emperors ruled from Yin on the shores of the Jade Sea, first and most glorious of the Yitish cities. But the Scarlet Emperor raised up a new city in the heart of the jungle and named it Sequo, the Glorious. Long fallen and overgrown, its glory lives now only in legend. Whilst the Purple Emperors preferred Tikwi, the many-towered city in the western hills, and the Maroon Emperors kept their martial court in Jinqui, the better to guard the frontiers of the empire against weavers from the Shadowlands. Today Yin is once more the capital of Yi Ti. There the 17th Azure Emperor Bugai sits in splendor in a palace larger than all of King's Landing. Yet far to the east, well beyond the borders of the Golden Empire proper, past the legendary Mountains of the Morn, in the city of Carcosa on the Hidden Sea, dwells in exile a sorcerer lord who claims to be the 69th Yellow Emperor, from a dynasty fallen for 1,000 years, and more recently, a general named Pol Quo, Hammer of the Jogos Nai, has given himself imperial honors, naming himself the first of the Orange Emperors, with the rude, sprawling garrison city called Trader Town as his capital. Which of these emperors will prevail is a question best left for the historians of the years to come. No discussion of Yi Ti would be complete without a mention of the 5 forts, a line of honking ancient citadels that stand along the far northeastern frontier of the empire, between the Bleeding Sea, named for the characteristically hue of its deep waters, supposedly a result of the plant that grows only there, and the Mountains of the Morn. The 5 forts are very old, older than the Golden Empire itself. Some claim they were risen by the Pearl Emperor during the morning of the Great Empire, to keep the Lion of Night and his demons from the realms of men. And indeed, there is something godlike or demonic about the monstrous size of the forts, for each of the 5 is large enough to house 10,000 men, and their massive walls stand almost 1,000 feet high. Of the lands that lie beyond the five forts, we know even less. Legends and lies and travelers' tales are all that ever reach us of these far places. We hear of cities where the men soar like eagles on leathered wings, of towns made of bones, of a race of bloodless men who dwell beyond the deep valley called the Dry Deep and the mountains. This whispers reach us of the Grey Waste and its cannibal sands, and the shrieks who live there, half-human creatures with green-scaled skin and venomous bites. Are these truly lizard men, or more likely, men clad in the skins of lizards? Or are they no more than fables, the grumpkins and snarks of the eastern deserts, and even the shrikes supposedly live in terror of Kadath and the Grey Waste, a city said to be older than time itself, where unspeakable rites are performed to slate the hunger of mad gods. Does such a city truly exist? If so, what is its nature? Certain scholars of the West have suggested Valyrian involvement in the construction of the five forts, for the great walls are single slabs of fused black stone that resemble certain Valyrian citadels in the West. But this seems unlikely, for the forts predate the Freehold's rise, and there is no record of any dragon's lords coming so far east. Thus the five forts must remain a mystery. They will stand today, unmarked by time, guarding the marshes of the Golden Empire against raiders of the Grey Waste. On such matters, even Lomas Longstrider is silent. Perhaps the priests of Yeti know, but if so, these are not truths they come to share with us.